The engine coughed twice, shuddered, and then went completely silent. Maya slammed her palm against the steering wheel and let out a sharp cry of frustration as the car rolled to a stop in the middle of a dark, empty road. Rain had just started to fall, tapping against the windshield like tiny fingers demanding to be let in. She turned the key again. Nothing. Not even a click. Her hands were shaking, and it was not only because of the cold. 15 minutes earlier, she had been running out of her own house with her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. Voices had been raised behind her. Glass had shattered somewhere in the kitchen, and she had grabbed her car keys off the counter without even looking back. She did not have a plan. She only had one thought, and that thought was to get away, to put distance between herself and the chaos she had left behind. Now she was stranded on an unfamiliar street, soaked, frightened, and completely alone. She reached for her phone and saw the battery was down to 9%. Her fingers hovered over her mother's contact, then pulled away. Calling home was not an option tonight. She thought about her few friends, but it was already past 10 at night, and she did not want to explain why she was crying, why her car had died, why her life felt like it was falling apart one piece at a time. Through the fogged-up window, she noticed a dim light glowing from a building about 100 yards down the road. It looked like a garage, the kind with a rolling metal door and old tires stacked outside. It was late for a repair shop to be open, but the light was clearly on, and right now, any light in the darkness felt like a small miracle. Maya wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her hoodie, took a breath that did nothing to calm her, and stepped out of the car into the rain. Her sneakers splashed through puddles as she half walked, half ran toward the light, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as if she could hold her own pieces together. By the time she reached the garage, her hoodie was soaked through, and her lips had started to tremble from the cold. She stood at the edge of the open door, unsure whether to knock or call out. Inside, a man was leaning over an engine, a wrench in his hand, completely focused on his work. He had not noticed her yet. He looked to be in his early 30s, with tired eyes and grease smudged along his forearm. There was a quiet steadiness about him, the kind of calm that seemed to come from years of solving one problem after another with his own two hands. A faded photograph was taped to the wall behind him, showing him holding a small girl on his shoulders, both of them laughing at the camera. Maya opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Instead, a small, involuntary sob escaped her throat. The man's head turned instantly. His eyes found her standing in the doorway, drenched and shaking, mascara running in dark lines down her cheeks. He set the wrench down without hesitation and walked toward her, his expression shifting from surprise to concern in the space of a single heartbeat. "Hey," he said gently, his voice low and even, the kind of voice that did not startle a frightened animal. "You okay?" Maya shook her head before she could stop herself. The honesty of the gesture surprised even her. She had spent the last 2 years learning how to hide things, how to smile when she wanted to scream, how to say she was fine when she was anything but. Yet here, in front of a stranger in a rain-soaked garage, the mask cracked without her permission. "My car," she managed to say, her voice breaking. "It just stopped. I don't know what happened." The man glanced past her toward the road, spotting the car parked crookedly, with its hazard lights blinking weakly through the rain. Then his eyes returned to her, and something in his expression softened even further, as though he understood that the stalled engine was only part of the story. "Come inside first," he said. "Get out of the rain. We can worry about the car in a minute." Maya hesitated. Every lesson she had ever learned about strangers told her to be careful, to keep her distance, to trust no one she did not know. But something about the calmness in his voice, the way he did not reach for her or crowd her space, made her feet move forward almost on their own. Inside the garage, the air was warm from a small space heater in the corner. The man grabbed a folded towel from a shelf and held it out to her without getting too close, letting her decide whether to take it. "I'm Jake," he said simply. "I own this place. Well, me and about 1,000 unpaid bills own this place." The small joke was not much, but it was enough to pull a shaky, unexpected, almost smile from Maya's lips. She took the towel and pressed it against her face, grateful for a moment to hide behind it. "Maya," she said quietly. Jake nodded, as if her name was simply information to be respected rather than questioned. He walked to a small table near the wall, where a coffee machine sat next to a stack of paper cups, and poured a cup of something warm. He set it on the table near her, not directly in front of her, giving her room. "You don't have to tell me anything," he said, "but if you want to sit down for a few minutes before you deal with the car, You're welcome to. Maya lowered herself onto a plastic chair near the table, her legs suddenly feeling weak now that the adrenaline of running was fading. She wrapped both hands around the warm cup, letting the heat seep into her fingers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the rain against the metal roof and the quiet hum of the space heater. Rough night? Jake finally asked, keeping his tone light, giving her an easy door to walk through if she wanted to. Maya let out a breath that was somewhere between a laugh and a cry. You could say that. Jake did not press further. Instead, he picked up a small radio from the workbench and turned the volume down low, filling the silence with a soft, unobtrusive hum of music instead of expectation. It was such a small gesture, but it told Maya something important. This man was not going to demand her story. He was simply going to make space for her, whether she chose to fill it or not. Minutes passed. The coffee grew cooler in her hands, but the shaking in her fingers slowly began to ease. She glanced around the garage, taking in the neatly organized tools, the calendar on the wall marked with reminders in a child's handwriting, the small drawing taped near the office door showing a stick-figure man and a stick-figure girl holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "Is that your daughter?" Maya asked, nodding toward the drawing, grateful for something else to focus on besides her own tangled thoughts. Jake's face changed instantly, softening in a way that seemed almost automatic. "Yeah, Lily, she's 8. Drew that for me last week. Said the shop looked too boring without art." "She's right," Maya said, and this time, the small smile that crossed her lips felt a little more real. "She usually is," Jake replied, a hint of warmth in his voice. Maya looked down at her hands wrapped around the paper cup. "Is it just you two?" Jake nodded slowly. "Just us. Have been for a while now." There was no self-pity in the way he said it, no request for sympathy, just a simple truth stated plainly. Maya found herself oddly comforted by that. In her own house, everything felt complicated, full of things left unsaid and feelings twisted into arguments. Here, in this small garage that smelled like oil and rain, things felt simple, even if only for a few minutes. "I should probably deal with my car," Maya said eventually, though she made no move to stand. Jake glanced toward the door, where the rain continued to fall steadily outside. "It's not going anywhere in this weather, and neither should you, not until it lets up a little. Let me take a look at it once the rain slows down. In the meantime, you can stay here as long as you need." Maya studied him carefully, searching for some hidden motive, some catch to his kindness. She had learned to expect one, but all she found in his expression was quiet patience, the same patience she imagined he must use when a nervous customer brought in a car making a strange noise nobody could explain. "Thank you," she said softly, the words carrying more weight than the simple phrase usually held. Jake gave a small nod and returned to the engine he had been working on before she arrived, giving her the privacy of her own thoughts while still remaining close enough that she did not feel alone. Maya watched him work for a while, the steady, practiced movements of his hands somehow calming in their rhythm. Outside, the rain began to slow, softening from a heavy downpour into a gentle patter. Maya's phone buzzed once in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a missed call from an unknown number, followed by a text message that simply read, "Where are you?" Her stomach tightened. She did not reply. She looked up and found Jake watching her, not with suspicion, but with a quiet awareness that suggested he had seen the flicker of fear cross her face. He did not ask about the message. He simply said, "You can stay as long as you need to figure things out. No rush." Maya nodded, grateful beyond words for a stranger's simple offer of safety on a night when she had felt completely alone. She had come to the garage that night expecting nothing more than a working phone signal and a dry place to wait out a storm. She had no idea that the tired mechanic with grease on his arms and a daughter's drawing taped to his wall was about to become one of the most important people in her life, or that this single stormy night would set into motion a chain of events that would completely reshape her future. For now, she simply sat in the warmth of the small garage, sipping coffee that had long gone cold, listening to the rain fade into silence, and feeling, for the first time in longer than she could remember, just a little bit safe. 3 days passed before Maya returned to the garage, and when she did, she told herself it was only to properly thank Jake for looking at her car that rainy night. He had gotten it running again with a new part he found somewhere in the back of his shop, refusing to take more than a small fee for it. She told herself that was the only reason she was standing outside the rolling metal door again, holding a paper bag with 2 coffees inside. She told herself a lot of things that were not entirely true. The truth was simpler and harder to admit. The garage had felt like the only calm place in her world for those few hours, and calm was something she had not felt in a very long time. Jake looked up from a clipboard when she stepped inside, and a small, genuine smile crossed his face. "Hey, stranger. Car giving you trouble again?" "No," Maya said, holding up the paper bag. "Car's fine. I just wanted to say thanks properly. You barely charged me anything for that part." Jake accepted the coffee with a nod of appreciation, gesturing for her to sit on the same plastic chair from before. "Wasn't much of a part. Just glad you got home safe that night." Maya's smile faltered slightly at the mention of home, but she covered it quickly by taking a sip of her own coffee. If Jake noticed, he did not push. He had already learned, in the short time he had known her, that pushing only made people retreat further. "How's Lily?" Maya asked, steering the conversation somewhere lighter. Jake's whole face lit up at the mention of his daughter. Convinced that dinosaurs and unicorns are secretly related, she's got a whole theory. Wouldn't stop talking about it this morning. Maya laughed, a real laugh this time, light and unguarded. "That sounds like a solid theory to me." "Don't encourage her," Jake said, though his tone carried no real complaint, only affection. They talked for a while about small, easy things, the kind of conversation that asked nothing difficult of either of them. Maya found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did anywhere else. There was something about the garage, about Jake's steady presence and complete lack of judgment, that made her feel like she could simply exist without having to perform happiness or hide sadness. Over the following weeks, Maya found reasons to stop by more often. Sometimes it was to bring coffee. Sometimes it was simply to sit on the plastic chair and do her homework while Jake worked on whatever car had been towed in that day. He never asked her to explain her visits, and she never offered a full explanation, though slowly, in small pieces, parts of her life began to surface. She mentioned, almost offhandedly one afternoon, that her mother worked unpredictable hours and was not always home when Maya needed her to be. Jake listened without comment, letting the sentence sit in the air rather than filling it with questions. Another day she mentioned that things had been tense at home lately, tense in a way that made the walls of the house feel too thin and the air too heavy. Jake simply nodded and asked if she wanted to help him organize a shelf of spare parts, giving her hands something to do while her mind processed whatever she had just admitted. It was during one of these afternoons that Maya first met Lily properly. The little girl came bursting through the garage door after school, her backpack half open and a drawing clutched in one hand, ready to show her father before she had even said hello. She stopped short when she noticed Maya sitting on the plastic chair, tilting her head with the open curiosity that only children seem to possess without embarrassment. "Who are you?" Lily asked bluntly. "Lily," Jake said, though there was a smile tugging at his mouth. "That's not really how we greet people." "It's okay," Maya said, laughing softly. "I'm Maya. I'm a friend of your dad's." Lily studied her for a long moment, the way children sometimes evaluate adults with a seriousness that surprises everyone around them. Then, apparently satisfied, she thrust the drawing toward Maya instead of her father. "This is a dinosaur riding a unicorn," Lily announced proudly. "They're friends now." Maya accepted the drawing with the same solemn respect Lily seemed to expect. "This is incredible. I think this might be the best drawing I've ever seen." Lily beamed, and just like that, an unlikely friendship was born. From that day forward, whenever Maya visited the garage, Lily would find her way over, chattering about her day, showing off new drawings, or insisting that Maya help her with a puzzle spread out across the small office desk. Maya found herself looking forward to those moments more than she expected, moments that felt uncomplicated and warm in a way so much of her life did not. Jake watched the friendship form with a quiet kind of gratitude he did not fully examine at first. Lily had lost her mother when she was far too young to understand the full weight of that loss, and though she was a bright, resilient child, Jake often worried about the absence of an older girl figure in her life, someone who could laugh with her about things that a father simply could not fully understand. Watching Maya patiently listen to Lily's endless stories about her school day, watching her draw silly pictures alongside her at the desk, Jake felt something in his chest ease that he had not realized was tense. But even as the garage became a small pocket of warmth for both Maya and Lily, Jake could not ignore the signs that something was wrong beneath the surface of Maya's life. She had started arriving later some days, her eyes tired in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep from studying. Once, she winced sharply when he accidentally bumped her arm while handing her a wrench, though she quickly covered the reaction with an apology for being clumsy. Another time, she flinched visibly when a customer's raised voice echoed from the front of the shop, her whole body tensing before she caught herself and forced a casual expression back onto her face. Jake said nothing about these moments at first, unsure of his place to comment, unsure if noticing too much would push Maya away entirely. He had learned, through years of raising Lily alone, that trust had to be built slowly, one small, consistent action at a time, rather than demanded all at once. One evening, as the sky outside began to darken and Lily sat at the desk finishing her homework, Maya lingered longer than usual, seemingly reluctant to leave. Jake noticed her glancing at the clock on the wall several times, her expression growing tighter with each glance. "You don't have to rush off," he said carefully, wiping his hands on a cloth as he approached. "Lily's got at least 20 more minutes of math left, if her complaining is anything to go by." "Hey," Lily protested from the desk, though she did not look up from her worksheet. Maya managed a small smile, but it did not fully reach her eyes. "I should probably head home soon. Everything okay?" Jake asked, keeping his tone light, offering an easy exit if she wanted one. Maya hesitated, her fingers twisting together in her lap. For a moment, Jake thought she might finally open up about whatever was weighing on her. Instead, she simply said, "Yeah, just tired, I guess." Jake did not press, though something in his gut told him there was more beneath that simple answer. He had seen enough in his own life to recognize the particular exhaustion of someone who was constantly bracing for something, always alert, never fully able to relax even in moments of safety. "All right," he said gently. "But you know you can talk to me, right? About anything. I'm not going to judge, and I'm not going anywhere." Maya's eyes flickered up to meet his, something vulnerable and uncertain passing behind them before she looked away again. "I know," she said quietly. "Thanks." She left a few minutes later, waving goodbye to Lily, who insisted on a high five before letting her go. Jake watched her walk down the street toward wherever she was headed, a heaviness settling in his chest that he could not quite name. Over the next few weeks, small pieces continued to surface. Maya mentioned once, in a voice that tried too hard to sound casual, that her mother had a boyfriend now, someone named Craig who had moved in a few months ago. She mentioned that things had gotten louder at home since then, though she quickly changed the subject before Jake could ask anything further. Another day, she showed up with a faint mark on her forearm, quickly explaining it away as an accident from bumping into a doorframe, though something in her tone made Jake doubt the explanation even as he chose not to challenge it directly. Jake began paying closer attention, not in an intrusive way, but in the quiet, watchful way of someone who cared deeply and did not want to miss something important. He noticed that Maya's visits to the garage often coincided with times she seemed to want to avoid going home. He noticed that she sometimes checked her phone anxiously, her shoulders tensing at certain messages before she tucked the phone away without responding. He noticed the careful way she chose her words whenever the topic of home arose, as though she was walking across ice that might crack beneath the wrong sentence. One afternoon, while Lily was occupied drawing at the desk, Jake found a moment alone with Maya near the back of the garage, where he was replacing a part on an old sedan. "Can I ask you something?" he said carefully, not looking up from his work, giving her the option to answer without the pressure of direct eye contact. Maya, who was handing him tools from a small tray, paused. "Sure. Is everything okay at home? And I mean really okay, not just the answer people give when they don't want to talk about it." The garage went quiet, except for the distant hum of traffic outside. Maya's hands stilled on the tray, her eyes fixed on some point on the floor. "It's complicated," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake set down the wrench he had been holding and turned to face her fully, giving her his complete attention. "Complicated how?" Maya's eyes filled with tears. She quickly tried to blink away, embarrassed by her own reaction. "My mom's boyfriend. He's not exactly the friendliest person. He gets really angry sometimes, and my mom, she just kind of goes along with whatever he wants because she's scared of being alone again, I think. I don't know. It's just tense all the time. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells whenever I'm home." Jake listened without interrupting, his expression carefully neutral, not wanting to react in a way that might make her regret sharing. "Has he ever been rough with you?" Jake asked gently. the question direct but not accusatory. Maya's silence stretched long enough to answer the question on its own. "It's not like that exactly," she finally said, though her voice lacked conviction. "He just gets in my space sometimes, grabs my arm too hard when he's upset, yells a lot. I mostly just try to stay out of his way." Jake felt something tighten in his chest, a mixture of concern and protectiveness that he worked hard to keep from showing on his face. He did not want Maya to feel like her honesty had caused a problem, even as every instinct in him wanted to immediately fix whatever was happening in that house. "That's not okay, Maya," he said quietly but firmly. "None of that is okay, no matter how normal it might feel right now." Maya wiped at her eyes quickly, glancing toward the desk where Lily remained thankfully absorbed in her drawing. "I don't really know what to do about it. My mom needs him, or thinks she does, and I don't want to make things worse by causing problems." "You're not causing problems by telling the truth," Jake said. "You deserve to feel safe in your own home. That's not too much to ask." Maya did not respond right away, but something in her posture shifted slightly, as though a small weight had lifted simply from having said the words out loud to someone who believed her. "Can we keep this between us for now?" she asked quietly. I don't know what would happen if people got involved. I don't want to make everything worse." Jake hesitated, torn between respecting her wishes and the growing certainty that this situation could not simply be left alone indefinitely. But he also understood, from years of quietly earning trust from wary customers and from his own daughter after a devastating loss, that forcing action too quickly could break the fragile connection Maya had only just begun to extend toward him. "For now," he said carefully, "I'll respect that. But Maya, I need you to promise me something. If things ever get worse, if you ever feel unsafe, you come here. Anytime, day or night. You call me, and I will come get you myself. Okay?" Maya nodded, a tremor of relief passing through her expression. "Okay." From the desk across the room, Lily suddenly looked up, apparently sensing the shift in mood without understanding its cause. "Are you guys okay?" she asked, her young voice carrying an innocent concern that broke some of the tension in the room. "We're okay, sweetheart," Jake said, forcing a reassuring smile onto his face. "Maya was just telling me about a tough day. We're all good now." Lily seemed satisfied with that explanation, returning to her drawing with the easy trust of a child who believed her father could fix most problems in the world. Jake wished in that moment that the situation was truly that simple. As the weeks continued, Jake kept his promise to watch and wait, though the waiting grew harder with each new small sign of trouble Maya let slip. A missed visit followed by an explanation that felt too rehearsed, a long sleeve worn on a warm day, a flinch at a car horn that seemed far too sharp a reaction for such an ordinary sound. Jake found himself lying awake some nights, staring at the ceiling, wondering how much longer he could stand back and simply be a safe place to land, rather than actively trying to change the ground beneath her feet. He never stopped being that safe place, though. Every time Maya walked through the garage doors, Jake made sure she was met with warmth, with coffee that was always slightly too sweet the way she liked it, with Lily's easy affection, and with his own steady, unwavering patience. He did not know exactly what was coming, but he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that whatever it was, he was not going to let Maya face it entirely alone. What he did not yet know was just how soon that promise would be tested, or how much everything was about to change for all three of them. The call came just after midnight, more than a month after that first rainy night in the garage. Jake was asleep on the couch, having drifted off while watching an old movie he had seen a dozen times before, when his phone buzzed loudly against the coffee table. He blinked awake, disoriented, and grabbed the phone just before it stopped ringing. "Hello?" There was silence on the other end for a moment, followed by a shaky breath. "Jake?" He sat up immediately, fully alert now, recognizing the voice even through its unsteadiness. "Maya? What's wrong? Can you come get me?" Her words came out fast and thin, wrapped in barely controlled fear. "I'm not far from the garage. I'm at the corner store on 5th. I didn't know where else to go." Jake was already reaching for his shoes. "I'm coming right now. Stay where there's light. Stay somewhere people can see you." "Okay," Maya whispered. "Please hurry." Jake glanced toward the hallway, where Lily's bedroom door remained closed, her steady breathing audible even from the living room. He hesitated only a second, before deciding he could not leave her alone, even for a short drive. He gently woke her, explaining as calmly as he could that they needed to go pick up a friend, helping her into her jacket over her pajamas, while she rubbed sleep from her eyes without complaint, sensing from her father's urgency that this was not a moment for questions. The drive to the corner store felt longer than it should have, every red light stretching endlessly, every slow car ahead of him a fresh source of frustration. When he finally pulled up to the small, brightly lit store, he spotted Maya immediately, sitting on the curb with her knees pulled tightly to her chest, a bag clutched beside her that appeared to contain some hastily grabbed belongings. Jake parked the car and got out quickly, approaching her with the same careful, unhurried steps he had used on the night they first met, not wanting to startle her even in his own urgency. "Hey," he said softly, crouching down to her level. "I'm here. You're safe now." Maya looked up at him, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed from crying. There was a fresh mark along her cheekbone that had not been there the last time he saw her, and the sight of it sent a wave of anger through him that he forced himself to control for her sake. "He grabbed me," Maya said, her voice cracking. "Craig, my mom wasn't home yet, and he was drinking, and he grabbed my arm, and I tried to pull away, and he pushed me into the wall, and I just ran. I didn't know where else to go." Jake's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady and calm, focused entirely on her. "You did the right thing coming here. You're safe now. I promise you that." He helped her to her feet, noticing the way she winced slightly as she stood, and guided her gently to the car. Lily, sitting in the back seat, immediately unbuckled and scooted over to make room, her young face full of concern despite not fully understanding what was happening. "Are you hurt?" Lily asked softly, as Maya climbed in beside her. Maya managed a small, watery smile for the little girl's sake. "I'm okay, sweetie. Just had a scary night." Lily, without hesitation, reached over and took Maya's hand, holding it gently the rest of the way back to the garage, offering the simple, unquestioning comfort that only a child could give so freely. Back at the garage, Jake settled Maya onto the familiar plastic chair, wrapping a blanket he kept in the office around her shoulders. He examined the mark on her cheek carefully, relieved to see it did not appear serious, though the sight of it still made his chest tighten with anger he had no outlet for in that moment. "I need to say something, and I need you to really hear me," Jake said, kneeling in front of her chair so their eyes were level. "What happened tonight? What's been happening? It's not something either of us can keep handling quietly. I care about you, Maya, and so does Lily. We can't just keep waiting for the next time something like this happens." Maya's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I know. I'm just scared of what happens next. What if they get angry that I left? What if I make everything worse?" "You leaving wasn't the problem," Jake said firmly. "What happened to you was the problem, and I know you're scared. But I have a friend, Karen. She works with social services. She helps kids in situations exactly like this one. I think it's time we called her." Maya's whole body tensed at the suggestion. "What if they take me somewhere I don't know anyone? What if it makes everything worse for my mom?" Jake reached out, resting a steady hand briefly on her shoulder. "I won't let that happen. I promise you, I will be right here through all of it. But Maya, you deserve to be safe. And right now, you're not safe at home. That has to change, one way or another." The garage fell silent, except for Lily's quiet humming, as she colored at the desk nearby, giving Maya and Jake a small bubble of adult conversation within the child's undisturbed comfort. Finally, after a long moment, Maya nodded, the movement small but decisive. "Okay," she whispered. "Call her." Jake made the call that night, speaking quietly into the phone while Maya sat wrapped in the blanket, watching Lily's crayon move steadily across the paper. Karen, though clearly roused from sleep, answered with the calm efficiency of someone who had handled emergency calls many times before, promising to meet them first thing in the morning to begin the process properly, and confirming that for tonight, Maya could safely remain with Jake. The following days moved quickly, filled with meetings, questions, and a whirlwind of paperwork that Maya found overwhelming despite Jake's steady presence beside her through every step. Karen visited the garage the next morning, speaking with Maya alone at first, gently asking questions about what had happened, documenting the mark on her cheek, and listening carefully as Maya, haltingly at first and then with increasing clarity, described the months of tension and fear that had built up at home. Karen then spoke with Jake, asking about his relationship with Maya, how they had met, and what role he was prepared to play going forward. Jake answered every question honestly, making clear that his only interest was ensuring Maya's safety and well-being, regardless of what that ultimately required of him. That afternoon, Karen visited Maya's home to speak with her mother, Denise. Maya waited anxiously at the garage during the visit, unable to focus on anything, her leg bouncing nervously as she stared at her phone, dreading the reaction her mother might have. Jake sat beside her saying little, simply offering his steady presence as reassurance. When Karen called later that evening, her voice carried the careful neutrality of someone delivering complicated news. Denise had been defensive at first, denying that anything serious had happened, insisting Maya was exaggerating a simple family disagreement. But when Karen mentioned the visible mark and the pattern of concerns Maya had described, something in Denise's resistance had cracked slightly. She had not fully admitted fault, but she also had not fought the suggestion that Maya stay somewhere safe temporarily while the situation was properly evaluated. "It's not a perfect outcome," Karen explained to Jake over the phone, with Maya listening anxiously beside him. "But it's a start. Your mother agreed to a temporary arrangement while we assess the home situation. Given your relationship with Maya, and given that you've already expressed willingness, I think a temporary placement with you, Jake, could be arranged, pending the proper approvals, of course." Jake glanced at Maya, whose eyes had widened with a mixture of hope and disbelief. He pressed the phone slightly away from his ear so she could hear more clearly. "I'm willing," Jake said firmly, without hesitation. "Whatever needs to happen, I'm willing." Over the following 2 weeks, a flurry of official processes unfolded around them. Social workers visited the small apartment above the garage where Jake and Lily lived, evaluating the space, asking detailed questions, and conducting interviews with each of them separately. Maya endured what felt like an endless series of assessments, each one requiring her to recount painful details she wished she could simply forget, though Karen remained patient and kind throughout, never rushing her or making her feel like a burden. Denise, for her part, seemed to drift between moments of genuine remorse and defensive denial, her own struggles with dependency on Craig's financial support, and her fear of being alone, complicating her ability to fully prioritize her daughter's safety. She agreed, ultimately, to a temporary custody arrangement that placed Maya with Jake while she worked through a series of required counseling sessions and demonstrated her ability to provide a safe, stable environment. Craig, when confronted by Karen and later by law enforcement following an official report, denied any wrongdoing, though the pattern of concerns raised by Maya's account, combined with the physical evidence, was enough to result in a formal warning and a restriction preventing him from having unsupervised contact with Maya going forward. Through all of it, Jake remained a constant presence, attending every meeting he was permitted to join, answering every question honestly, and making it clear to every official who crossed his path that his priority was simply Maya's safety and well-being, nothing more complicated than that. Lily, meanwhile, adjusted to the sudden change in her household with the easy resilience of childhood, delighted rather than confused by the prospect of Maya staying with them more permanently. She helped Jake clear out a small spare room that had mostly been used for storage, insisting on decorating it herself, with a handful of her own drawings taped haphazardly to the walls, determined to make the space welcoming in her own 8-year-old way. "You can put your things right here," Lily announced proudly, showing Maya the newly cleared shelf on the day she officially moved her few belongings into the apartment. "And I put my best drawing right there, so you have something nice to look at." Maya, standing in the doorway of the small room with a single duffel bag containing most of what she owned, felt a lump rise in her throat at the sight of the child's careful effort. "It's perfect, Lily, thank you." That night, as Maya lay in the unfamiliar bed in the small spare room, listening to the quiet sounds of a household settling into sleep, she found herself crying again, though these tears felt different from the ones that had fallen the night her car broke down. These were not tears of fear or desperation. They were something closer to relief, mixed with a grief she had not yet allowed herself to fully feel for the mother who had not been able to protect her, and gratitude for the unexpected family that had opened its doors to her instead. Down the hall, Jake stood quietly outside her door for a moment, listening to the muffled sound of her crying, resisting the urge to knock and instead simply standing guard, a silent reminder that she was no longer facing her fears entirely alone. He thought about the promise he had made to her that very first rainy night, that she could come to him any time, day or night, and he felt a quiet, fierce determination settle over him. Whatever challenges lay ahead in navigating this new arrangement, whatever difficulties would arise in helping a frightened teenager learn to trust safety again, he was fully prepared to meet them. What none of them yet knew was that the temporary arrangement would soon be tested by forces beyond their control, as Denise's resolve wavered and legal complications threatened to unravel the fragile stability they had only just begun to build. 6 weeks into the temporary arrangement, life at the small apartment above the garage had begun to settle into a rhythm that almost felt normal. Maya had started attending a support group Karen recommended, sitting in a circle of other teenagers who understood, without needing lengthy explanations, what it meant to carry the particular weight of an unstable home. She had grown more comfortable in the apartment too, learning which floorboard near the kitchen creaked loudly enough to wake Lily, memorizing the specific way Jake liked his coffee in the mornings, and slowly allowing herself to unpack not just her belongings, but her guarded expectations about what safety could actually feel like. Still, the arrangement remained officially temporary, and that word hung over every quiet dinner and every ordinary morning like a shadow none of them could fully ignore. A final custody hearing had been scheduled, and as the date approached, tension began creeping back into corners of their lives that had only just started to feel settled. Denise had completed most of her required counseling sessions, and according to Karen's careful updates, she had made an effort to separate herself from Craig, moving out of the shared apartment and into a smaller place on her own. Whether this reflected genuine change or simply the pressure of the legal process, Jake could not be certain, and he suspected even Karen held some reservations despite her professional neutrality. The uncertainty weighed heavily on Maya, who found herself caught in an exhausting tangle of emotions. She loved her mother, despite everything, and some small part of her still hoped for the version of Denise who used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings before things had grown so complicated. But she had also, for the first time in longer than she could remember, begun to feel genuinely safe, genuinely cared for, in a home that did not require her to constantly brace for the next outburst or the next disappointment. "What if the judge decides I have to go back?" Maya asked one evening, sitting across from Jake at the small kitchen table, while Lily colored quietly nearby, half listening despite pretending otherwise. Jake considered his words carefully before answering, unwilling to make promises he could not guarantee. "I can't tell you exactly what will happen, because I honestly don't know. But I can tell you that Karen is going to present everything honestly to the judge, and that your voice matters in this too. You're old enough that the court will want to hear what you want, not just what the adults around you think is best." "What if what I want isn't what's best for my mom?" Maya asked quietly, guilt evident in her voice. "Wanting to be safe isn't selfish," Jake said gently. "You're allowed to want good things for yourself, even if that means disappointing someone else." Maya nodded slowly, though the worry did not fully leave her expression. Lily, apparently unable to stay silent any longer, looked up from her drawing with the blunt honesty only a child could offer. "I don't want you to go anywhere," she said simply. "You're basically my sister now." The words, spoken without any awareness of their weight, settled over the table like a quiet blessing. Maya felt her eyes sting with unexpected emotion, and Jake reached over to gently squeeze his daughter's shoulder, silently grateful for her uncomplicated honesty. The days leading up to the hearing passed in a blur of preparation. Karen met with Maya several times to help her understand what to expect, careful to explain the process without adding unnecessary fear. Jake, meanwhile, gathered whatever documentation might help demonstrate the stability of the home he could offer, from his steady income records to character references from long-standing customers who had known him for years. On the morning of the hearing, Maya dressed carefully in an outfit Jake had helped her pick out the night before, her hands trembling slightly as she fixed her hair in the small bathroom mirror. Jake knocked softly on the door before entering, offering a reassuring smile despite the nervous tension visible in his own posture. "Ready?" he asked gently. "Not really," Maya admitted, "but I don't think I'll ever feel ready for this." "That's fair," Jake said. "You don't have to feel ready. You just have to be honest. That's all anyone can ask." The courtroom felt smaller and more ordinary than Maya had imagined, lacking the dramatic grandeur she had somehow expected from television shows. A calm, attentive judge named Mr. Whitfield presided over the proceedings, listening carefully as Karen presented her findings, as Jake answered questions about his home and his intentions, and as Denise, seated across the room looking noticeably thinner and more anxious than Maya remembered, offered her own account of the changes she had attempted to make. When it came time for Maya to speak, her voice shook at first, but steadied as she described, in her own words, the fear that had defined so much of her home life before that rainy night, and the sense of safety she had found since. She spoke honestly about still loving her mother, about hoping for her well-being, but also about needing stability that she had not been able to find at home. Mr. Whitfield listened without visible judgment, occasionally jotting notes, asking a few careful follow-up questions that Maya answered as honestly as she could manage. When Denise spoke, her voice cracked with what appeared to be genuine emotion as she acknowledged, more fully than she had during any of the earlier meetings, the ways she had failed to protect her daughter, and expressed her hope that with continued support, she might eventually rebuild that trust. The hearing stretched across several hours, filled with documentation, testimony, and careful deliberation. Maya sat beside Jake through most of it, occasionally reaching for his hand during the more difficult moments, grateful for the steady, unwavering presence beside her. When Mr. Whitfield finally announced his decision, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. He explained, in careful, measured language, that while he recognized Denise's efforts toward positive change, the priority of the court remained Maya's immediate safety and stability. Given the strength of the home environment Jake had demonstrated, given Maya's own clearly expressed wishes, and given the ongoing concerns about the household she had left, he was granting Jake extended guardianship, with the arrangement to be reviewed periodically, and with provisions allowing Denise supervised visitation as she continued to demonstrate stability in her own life. Maya felt a wave of relief so powerful it nearly buckled her knees, followed almost immediately by a complicated grief as she watched her mother's shoulders sag across the room. Despite everything, despite the fear and the tension that had defined so much of their relationship, Maya still loved her, and the bittersweet nature of the outcome settled heavily over her chest, even amid the relief. Outside the courtroom, Denise approached hesitantly, her eyes red from crying. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly to Maya, "for being brave enough to say what you needed. I'm sorry I couldn't be the one to give it to you myself. Not fully, not yet, but I'm going to keep trying, if you'll let me." Maya, uncertain how to fully process the swirl of emotions inside her, simply nodded and allowed her mother a brief, careful hug, unsure exactly what their relationship would look like going forward, but grateful, at least, for the door left open to some version of it. Jake watched the exchange from a respectful distance, giving Maya the space to navigate this complicated moment on her own terms. When she finally turned back toward him, her eyes still damp, but her expression carrying a lightness he had not seen in her before, he simply opened his arms, and she stepped into them without hesitation, allowing herself, for the first time, to fully believe that this fragile new stability might actually last. The drive home that afternoon felt different from every drive that had come before it. Lily, who had stayed with a neighbor during the hearing, greeted them at the door with an enormous, slightly lopsided cake she had insisted on helping decorate, spelling out "Welcome Home" in crooked letters made of colorful icing. "I know it's not your actual home yet, officially," Lily explained with the serious precision of an 8-year-old determined to get the details right, "but Dad said today makes it official enough." Maya laughed, a full, unguarded laugh that seemed to release something long held tight within her chest. "It's perfect, Lily. Thank you." That evening, as the three of them sat together around the small kitchen table sharing the slightly uneven cake, Maya found herself looking around at the modest apartment that had, in a matter of months, become something she had never quite dared to hope for. It was not a grand transformation, not a fairy tale ending wrapped in perfect resolution. There would be more adjustments ahead, more complicated feelings to work through regarding her mother, more ordinary struggles of blending into a new family structure. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Maya felt something that had once seemed impossibly out of reach. She felt safe, she felt wanted, and sitting there, surrounded by the warm, imperfect love of a mechanic and his daughter who had opened their home and their hearts without hesitation, she allowed herself to simply exist in that feeling, without bracing for it to disappear. 2 years passed, marked not by dramatic turning points but by the steady accumulation of ordinary days that, taken together, had quietly built something extraordinary. The small apartment above the garage had become simply home, its walls now covered with a growing collection of Lily's drawings alongside photographs that had not existed in that space before, snapshots of birthdays celebrated together, holidays spent as a family, and small everyday moments too ordinary to have seemed worth capturing, until Maya arrived and taught them all how much those ordinary moments could actually mean. Maya had grown taller, more confident. The guarded tension that once seemed permanently etched into her shoulders gradually replaced by an easy openness that surprised even her some days when she caught her own reflection looking genuinely happy. She had finished high school the previous spring, graduating with grades strong enough to earn a partial scholarship to the local community college, where she had begun taking courses toward a degree in social work, drawn to the field by an understanding of exactly how much a single caring adult could change the entire trajectory of a young person's life. She still worked part-time at the garage on weekends, not out of necessity anymore, but because the space had become something more meaningful than simply a place of employment. It was where her story had truly begun, and returning to it regularly felt like a way of honoring that beginning. On a bright Saturday morning, Maya stood beneath the raised hood of an aging sedan, carefully explaining to a nervous customer exactly what needed to be repaired, her voice carrying the same patient, reassuring tone she had first learned from watching Jake all those years ago. The customer, an older woman clearly anxious about the cost of repairs, visibly relaxed as Maya walked her through the options without any hint of condescension, offering honest advice rather than simply pushing for the most expensive solution. "You learned that from him, didn't you?" the woman said with a knowing smile, nodding toward Jake, who was visible through the office window, laughing at something Lily had said while helping her with a school project spread across the desk. "Learned everything from him," Maya said, smiling, "not just the cars." After the customer left, satisfied and reassured, Maya wandered into the office, where 10-year-old Lily was gluing the final touches onto a diorama depicting, somewhat improbably, an entire ecosystem populated by both dinosaurs and small paper unicorns, apparently still committed to the theory she had first proposed years earlier. "They coexist peacefully," Lily explained seriously, noticing Maya's amused expression. "It's a whole thing. I have a presentation and everything. I would expect nothing less," Maya said, settling into the chair beside her, to help steady a particularly stubborn paper mountain that kept collapsing. Jake watched the two of them from across the room, a warmth settling over him that had become familiar over the past 2 years, but had never once lost its meaning. He thought back, as he often did on quiet mornings like this one, to that first rainy night, to the frightened teenager who had appeared in his garage doorway soaked and shaking, utterly convinced her world was falling apart around her. He remembered the uncertainty of those early weeks, the careful navigation required to earn her trust without overwhelming her fragile sense of safety, the anxious months of legal proceedings that could have ended so differently. He thought, too, about how much Maya had given to their small family in return, the steady, quiet strength she brought into their home, the way she had become, without either of them ever formally deciding it, exactly the older sister Lily had needed, and something closer to a daughter than he had ever expected to have again after losing his wife. Denise, for her part, had continued the slow, imperfect work of rebuilding trust. Her supervised visits had gradually expanded as she demonstrated consistent stability, and while the relationship between mother and daughter remained complicated, carrying the weight of everything that had happened, it had also grown into something gentler than either of them might have predicted during that difficult first year. Denise now attended some of Maya's college events when invited, sitting quietly in the audience with an expression of quiet pride and lingering regret, grateful simply to be included in whatever way Maya was willing to allow. That afternoon, as the garage grew quiet during the natural lull between customers, Jake found himself standing beside Maya near the same workbench where they had first properly talked, years earlier, about the fear she had been carrying. He watched her methodically organizing a tray of tools, her movements confident and practiced now in a way that would have seemed impossible to imagine on that first stormy night. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said, echoing, though neither of them consciously noticed it, the exact words he had used the day he first learned the full truth about her situation at home. Maya glanced up, smiling faintly at something in his tone. "Sure. Do you ever think about that night? The car, the rain, all of it?" Maya considered the question for a moment, setting down the wrench in her hand. "All the time, actually. I used to think it was the worst night of my life, you know, everything falling apart at once. But now I think it might have been the best thing that ever happened to me, even though it didn't feel like it at the time." Jake nodded slowly, understanding exactly what she meant, having thought something similar himself, on more than one quiet evening. Funny how that works sometimes. The worst moments leading somewhere you never expected. "I used to think I was just unlucky," Maya continued, her voice thoughtful, that things were always going to fall apart, no matter what I did. But you and Lily, you showed me that sometimes things fall apart so they can be rebuilt into something better. Something you actually choose, instead of something you're just stuck with. Jake felt his throat tighten slightly with emotion, though he kept his tone light, unwilling to make the moment more emotional than Maya might be comfortable with. Well, for what it's worth, I'd say we got pretty lucky too, having you find your way into our garage that night. Lily, overhearing the tail end of the conversation from across the room, looked up from her diorama with the same blunt honesty that had defined her from the very beginning. We're the lucky ones, she declared firmly, as though settling the matter once and for all. Maya's the best big sister in the whole world. Maya laughed, crossing the room to ruffle Lily's hair affectionately, earning an exaggerated protest about her carefully arranged bangs. The easy warmth of their small family filled the garage in that moment. A warmth built not from perfect circumstances or an absence of hardship, but from the deliberate, patient choices each of them had made to show up for one another, day after day, through both the difficult moments and the ordinary ones. Later that evening, as the sun began to set and the garage prepared to close for the day, Maya stepped outside for a moment, watching the sky shift into soft shades of orange and pink above the quiet street. She thought about the frightened girl who had once stood in nearly this exact spot, soaked from the rain, certain that her life had reached some kind of breaking point. She had been right, in a way. It had been a breaking point, but not the kind she had feared. It had been the beginning of everything breaking apart just enough to let something better take root, something built not on the family she had been born into, but on the family she had ultimately found her way toward, one small act of kindness at a time. Behind her, she heard the familiar sound of the garage door beginning to close, followed by Jake's voice calling out that dinner would be ready soon, and Lily's excited addition that she had picked the movie for movie night, something involving dinosaurs, unsurprisingly. Maya smiled, turning to walk back inside, toward the warm, ordinary, deeply cherished life that had grown from that single rainy night when a crying teenager had wandered into a small garage, having no idea that everything was about to change.